So we've got a Mr. and Mrs Pacman. This is a -35 game with the short head cabinet. You can see it's pretty standard, just the board layout's a little different in this game. So you've got your soundboard over here, lamp driver, MPU board, and your solenoid driver board. One thing bad on this particular one is it had a battery and it's got corrosion. It's pretty extensive. It goes all the way up here, all the way down the ground plane, all the way around, and it's all the way up to here. That's the bad news. The good news is that it hasn't really gotten into the components down here. So the game actually does boot. I suspect this corrosion issue is going to come back to haunt us. But here, let's talk about a couple things that are interesting to this game. First off, when I turn it on, you'll notice that the playfield general illumination does not come on immediately. Watch. So, the game's on, fluorescent comes on, but none of the GI comes on. And then in a second, you'll see it. See how the GI came on? And the reason why it does that is because the lighting for the playfield is triac controlled, electronically controlled. So what a triac is it's essentially a solid state relay. Here's the bottom panel on the game. This is pretty standard. The rectifier board. One of the bridges died and the guy mounted it over here. That's pretty typical. I see that repair a lot. They really shouldn't do that. The reason why they're mounted here and bottom out against this metal plate is the metal plate acts like a giant heat sink. But whatever. Right here is the triac. It's a little hard to see, but let me zoom in on it. Let's see if I can get it. It doesn't look like really anything. It's like a little metal can with some wires going to it, but that's what really controls the GI lighting, is that triac. Zoom back out. Sorry for the noisy zoom. Now, that is done through a board on the under playfield. This little guy right here, this thing called the auxiliary driver board, and it's got a single chip on it. And then it also has a 555 light. This 555 light's important. If the light goes out, a lot of times the playfield lights won't work. For example, you can see the playfield GI is on. You can see that this lamp's on. If I pull the lamp out, a lot of times it will turn this off and it won't come back on. It's still working now, so it's not foolproof, but what this does is it provides a load to that chip that the game needs to see. It's kind of like how these things work, these solenoid expander boards, same deal. They have a little light too that when this enables, it does so through this light, and again this light has to work. I'm going to give you a better explanation on this triac control thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press a little red button here, the test button, inside the coin door to put the game into test. So now, see all the CPU control lighting is going, but notice the GI is blinking too, the general illumination lights. And the reason is it's doing it through that little expansion board. So you can see this light going on and off through this auxiliary driver board, and that's causing our GI lights to go on and off. So what happens if I pull this light bulb? Does it stop working? No, still works. Okay. So the light bulb you can see isn't completely mandatory, but if I pull this connector, see the light's still going, but the playfield general illumination is no longer working. Now I'll put the connector back on, and then it's back to working. And now you can also hear the solenoid expander going too, blinking here and blinking the relay in there. Now why is this all important? Well, we're coming to that. So now I move to display test. You can see all the displays work, but the crux of the problem here is when I advance it to the coil test. It's going through the coils now. You can see the coil numbers going off in the display, but none of the coils are firing. So what becomes interesting is when we get about here. Listen. So 12 through 20. The solenoid expander board goes off. 12 through 20. So 13 through 20. So we've talked about this before, and the way stuff gets kind of decoded in that through the MPU board, where the PIA here sends a encoded signal through that connector over the solenoid driver board over to this connector. It's decoded by this guy, and then goes through one of these pre-driver trips and out to one of these and fires the solenoids in the game. Obviously, that signal's being corrupted somehow. That means that some bit is stuck high or low, and the game is confused. So that's what we need to figure out what is wrong. My bet is that the problem is going to be related to corrosion between the PIA and this connector. Since this board has a fair amount of battery corrosion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to use my digital multimeter and check between the output pins of this PIA, which is the peripheral interface adapter, which actually is the thing that tells us on which coil to fire, and the pins here. The reason why I don't think it's the connector over here is if I wiggle this guy, if there's a problem, a lot of times I'll hear the other coils fire as things encode. You see, now we're in coil, 1 through 19 do nothing, or 1 through 18 do nothing. And sometimes if you've got a problem with a bad connector here, wiggling it will get the coils to fire momentarily. Likewise, you can do the same thing on this one too. You can do a little wiggle action and get it too, but again, 1 through 18 or whatever, I'm not getting any change. So I believe that there's probably a break on this board, or perhaps this PIA is bad. Now, one thing we can do is we can try swapping these two PIAs. If the outputs of this indeed are bad, then things ought to change. So why don't I do that first? That's the least invasive thing to do. So what I did is we can check the continuity between the top 4 pins here, these 4 resistors here, and then from these resistors to pin, pin 10, 11, and 12, and 13, which is PB0, PB1, PB2, and PB3 on the schematics. So you can see here's the momentary solenoid data, goes through those 4 resistors, then off to the PIA at U11. Again, PB0, which is pin 10, PB1, pin 11, PB12, pin 12, and PB13. Those are the momentaries that I think are one line is missing. You can check the continuity, but what I did is I just took a little screwdriver, and you can actually lift the plastic bodies up just a little bit, and I saw corrosion on the socket itself, so I think that was the problem. So I've just gone ahead and removed the socket, and I'm going to put a new one in and see if that has solved any of our problems. So I put a new socket in here, just on a hunch, from what I could tell if that socket had problems. Got the game in a track mode. You can already hear that it's acting differently. It didn't do that before. So here I'm going to put it in test mode. So here's the lamps, and then here's the displays. It's testing the displays. Now it's going to go to the coil test, and the trick is to see if coils 1 through 18 do something different than they were before, which was nothing. And then if 1 through 8? No, I'm sorry, 1 through 12 do something different, and then 13 through 19 if they do something different. So here we go. 1. So you can hear it. You can hear it firing stuff now. So in fact, it is doing something. Now, here's the solenoid expander board. Hear it clicking? So what the solenoid expander board is supposed to do is alternate. Here, let me turn this off so you can hear me better. What the solenoid expansion board does is alternate. So they had a limited number of transistors here. So what they did is that any one transistor could control 2 devices. So, I don't know what the exact event is, but apparently when the solenoid expansion board is pulled in, it'll automatically drop individual drop targets. And before, you could hear the solenoid board clicking in, but actually not dropping these, which means that the multiplexing going between the PIA out that connector over to this connector and onto this board and decode it by this chip was not working. And again, that was because we had a bad socket due to this battery corrosion on the PIA. And I could check the continuity from pin 10, 11, 12, 13 over to these resistors over here and over there, but I could just tell that the socket was bad. It was really obvious that there was a corrosion issue. Now, is this other corrosion going to come back to haunt him? Yeah, look at it. It's going to come back. I mean, it's like a cancer unless you correct it. But at least now we got him running. Let's start a game.
Slow. Skill shot again.
So you can see that we got a game that's working now.
Pacman saucer.
Saucer, that's this guy up there.
3, 2, 1, go.
Oh, I was supposed to be playing Pac-Man here with the flipper buttons. See, I can change direction. The left button changes the direction here, and then the right button actually moves it. I ran into him.